Okay, welcome everyone to day 2 of our workshop, Science and Art at the Bottom of the World. Catherine Rihimaki. I am Associate Director at the Council on Science and Technology, who is hosting this series of workshops. But really, I'm not the main feature, so the main feature attraction for the workshop are our 3 experts, John Higgins, who is a professor of geosciences at Princeton University, and he will briefly talk about some of his work in Antarctica and work that was with 2 artists, Ian Van Coller and Todd Anderson. And so I am going to just really quickly give you an outline for what the workshop will be today, and then I'm going to turn things over to them. So obviously we're in the welcome period right now, so I'm going to turn it over to our gentlemen for a quick recap, and then what we're going to do is actually turn things over to all of you, and so we will have breakout room discussions by all of you, and some summary, and I'll explain that in just a moment. And then hopefully we'll save a little bit of time for Q&A with John, Todd, and Ian, which we didn't have a tremendous amount of time for on Tuesday. I am thrilled that folks did the homework assignment that was given to them. And so just to recall, or for those of you who weren't there on Tuesday, the prompt for your homework, since this is a workshop, was to respond to one of the provided images that was on our shared Google Drive, or to use an image of your own, and to then manipulate it either digitally or printing it out and manipulating it by hand. And I was thrilled over the last 2 days to see those uploads and some of the fantastic work that each of you did, definitely putting my pathetic offering, which I will show you in a moment, just to make you all feel less shy about sharing your own, to shame. So with that, I'm going to actually turn this over. I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to John and Todd and Ian, just to give us a quick summary of what was discussed on Tuesday, especially for anyone who wasn't able to be there for our workshop on Tuesday.
All right. Thank you very much, Catherine. I'm going to share my screen here and just chime in and give you guys a brief overview of, the things we talked about on Tuesday, and then I'm going to hand it over to Ian and Todd, who are going to kind of finish up.
I don't think it'll be bad to ask.
Sorry, I think we've got some back talk. All right, now I think we're good. Perfect. All right. So for my 5-minute recap, just to remind you guys, Art and Science at the Bottom of the World, who I am, John Higgins. I'm a geochemist or geoscientist here at Princeton University. And this was part of NSF sponsored, but many universities involved project with Todd Anderson and Ian Van Coller, who I'm going to hand it off to shortly, to kind of combine science and art, to think about the other ways to which we can communicate science and reach much broader audiences than we would necessarily with the approaches we typically do of presentations and papers and stuff, and I think broaden the discussion of an importance of science in the kind of general public. So just to refresh you guys, I'm in particular very interested in ice cores, and I think one of the interesting aspects of, or the points of Ian and Todd being interested in the stuff we're doing, is that we are looking at kind of Earth history through ice cores. And so what are ice cores? Just a reminder is that ice cores start as snow at the surface, and then it essentially, as snow is buried down to depths of many hundreds of feet, it gets compressed and packed, and those beautiful little snowflakes turn into ice crystals and then turn into solid ice that has little pockets of air that are essentially trapped between it. And so it's just a picture of what that looks like. Very easy to envision how these little pockets of air in here are essentially encapsulating little bits of Earth's ancient atmosphere. And this is what us as scientists are accessing and understanding in order to essentially say things about what Earth's climate was like in the past. Now, what are the kind of scientific questions we're particularly interested in? I talked a lot about, natural variations in Earth's climate last time, and I showed, this picture, which essentially gives you 3 different snapshots. The one in the middle is from pre-industrial, or kind of what we think about as today. These are, again, views down on the northern hemisphere. And on the left, we've got 20,000 years ago, the last major glacial maximum. And on the right, we have this period of 3 million years ago. And our real interest is understanding the Earth was climatologically very different during these snapshots. And we want to know why was that the case, and what was the state of the world, right? How much warmer was the world? How much higher were greenhouse gases? What was the difference in sea level? And so to kind of end my review and just drive home, in the 48 hours since we last had our class, there's been a major kind of study that's come out that I've pointed to here, which talks about essentially, motivates again why we're doing this work, right? Is that part of this work is to understand how the Earth's climate system responds to changes in greenhouse gases. And this is a scientific topic that many people are attacking from a number of different angles. But us, as ice core scientists are making, important contributions to this. And so I've just cut out a bit of this article, which showed up yesterday, this long study that's come out of work. And it talks again about essentially those same snapshot periods that I just showed you guys in the previous slide, the last glaciation around 20,000 years ago, and this period around 3 million years. And so these are these 2 intervals in recent Earth history that scientists are really interested in using as analogs to how the Earth may change in the future. And so that's the reprisal of the kind of science aspect of this. And so just to finish off and hand off to Todd and Ian, they came out to essentially join us this last year on what is one of 2 years of field work that we have funded by the National Science Foundation, where we essentially go out to these areas, blue ice areas, and excavate ice cores and then ship them back to the US and analyze them in our labs. And so we were really privileged to have them out with us this year. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Todd and Ian to kind of take you through their part of it.
Sure. So I guess, Ian, if you want, I can go ahead and start. Just do a real quick recap. Pull my screen up here. So just a real quick recap. So Ian and I are artists, and then as John mentioned, through the National Science Foundation, we were able to come out and visit John and his ice coring team in the Allen Hills in Antarctica. Ian and I have been working together for about 10 years, and really the kind of the heart of our research that we were trying to share with you is kind of the art and science collaborations that we do. Our goal is to, try and look at different ways of communicating the science that people like John are doing, and we use art as a tool. At the outset of my presentation on Tuesday, I talked a little bit about the artist Alfredo Jarre and kind of the way he kind of broke down large subjects into kind of a tight or narrow focus, and then kind of talked about a little bit how Ian and I try and do the same thing. The article that John was just sharing, that major study rules out super high and low climate sensitivity to CO2, is really perfect because that type of work that John's doing and those types of studies and papers, Ian and I find extremely important, and that we want to share this type of news. And so what we're trying to do as artists is to take that kind of important data and those types of insights and then just try and spread it just a little bit further and try and broaden the scientist audience. So that's at essence what we do. So Ian, is there anything you wanted to add? I think you might be muted, Ian.
Sorry, yeah, my family was making a noise. So. I guess I could just see if I could share this image. So this is one that I didn't get to show. So this is an example of a collaboration with a scientist that I talked about in the previous meeting. This particular one is a paleoclimatologist, archaeologist, who's looking at receding ice patches in Glacier National Park and the archaeology that's being revealed in that place. So just an example of, you know, what a collaboration with a scientist might look like as an actual artwork. But of course, this is very sort of a limited realm, and you know, we encourage you guys to expand from this or take whatever route, creative route that you felt would be interesting to you guys. So I look forward to seeing what you came up with.
Excellent. All right. So with that, what we are going to do is head to breakout rooms, and I'm going to share my screen one more time just to give you guys a reminder of what we'll be doing. So first of all, I have created a Google Drive, and I've put the link into the chat for where materials are. Most of you have successfully found this because I was thrilled to see that many of you had uploaded your work here into the folder that says upload your work here. If you are interested, presentations from Tuesday, which we just had a recap of, are also here. And there are a few photos that you were able to use for today, along with some non-technical summaries of the science. This document here, Breakout Rooms discussion on Thursday, is this Google document that I showed earlier, and these Google Slides. And so again, just to remind you what the prompt was for the homework, it's here to basically use the inspiration from Todd and Ian and any of your own inspiration to create your own artwork. This is what I created using one of Ian's images, manipulating it to sort of look vaguely like a woodcut inspired by Todd. And what I added to it was the poem Angels by Mary Oliver. You might see an angel anytime and anywhere. Of course, you have to open your eyes to a kind of second level, but it's not really hard. The whole business of what's reality and what isn't has never been solved and probably never will be, etc. And then she finishes by saying, I don't care how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. It's enough to know that for some people they exist and that they dance. I was just very much struck by Ian's annotated version of this with the microscopic organisms that are in the ice, and thinking of those as angels, and the faith that it takes for someone who's studying this to think that microscopic organisms exist in what otherwise looks like transparent ice. So that is my attempt at interpreting something, mixing the science and art. And so what I'm going to do is send you guys to discussion rooms. And so there'll be 4 people per room, and your prompt, again, this is in the Google slide that you have access to because I've given you the link to the Google Drive folder that has this in there, is in your discussion room. Of course, introduce yourselves to each other. And then create a new slide for your breakout room just to take notes, and someone should drive that note-taking process. So have someone who is the designated speaker for your group. And then the 3 questions that you might chew on is what imagery you chose and why, how you manipulated the imagery, what is expressed in the final image that is perhaps different from the original or preserves something important from the original. And I'm going to give you guys as much freedom to then go in whatever direction the conversation leads you. Okay. For those of you who have not been in breakout rooms before, you should be able to ask for help through a button. And so that will send me a note that you would like one of us to come talk to you. For example, if any of this isn't clear. You know, I'm going to give 15 minutes at the end of, at 14 minutes, I'll give a warning that there's 1 minute left, and then we will suck you back into the main room. So in the meantime, in the breakout rooms, you should have 4 people all together. You guys can share your own slides with each other, and the chat window is just chats amongst the 4 of you, whoever's in that breakout room. Okay, I hope that is clear. I'm going to stop sharing here, and unless there are questions, then I will go ahead and open all the breakout rooms. Okay, 15 minutes, and we will see you back here. One of the comments that was made by group 3 was about the trained eye, and you know how some of these works are playing off the idea of the trained eye, and you know, you guys phrased it as the overlaying scientific information, but one of the things that strikes me and struck me about the presentations was really the different ways in which your eyes are trained. And so the artist's trained eye versus the scientist's trained eye. And there was a question in the chat for John specifically, and I think it hits on this idea. And so how working with artists has changed your view of your field area, sort of by looking through what someone else might pick up through their view.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I would say to some extent it's still a work in progress, right? Because you know the art is still ongoing, and we're still, I think, you know, I'm trying to grapple with what their vision of the area is and how they see the work that we're doing. I mean, I can say from a very practical, you know, maybe somewhat banal perspective that, you know, lighting matters a huge amount, and so these guys were up at whenever they needed to be out there to get good light to see things. And so, you know, it certainly is an interesting and different approach, you know, from how I see it and how I am viewing the landscape from a very, you know, analytical perspective, and the fact that I'm mostly just looking for the next best place to drill. And, you know, these guys are paying attention to many other aspects of it. And I think, you know, provide a different, for me anyways, frankly, just having people in the field that don't just care about the science, you know, whether they were, you know, artists, photographers, or, you know, anybody else. I think that there is a different perspective that you bring in living on and dealing with that sort of landscape. So thanks for the question.
Let me direct that also to Todd and Ian. You know, you guys were basically part of an NSF project to bring artists to Antarctica, and you know they fund elsewhere artists to go on other projects as well. But you know, what is it in your view that NSF gets out of that? You know, why is it that NSF is interested in having artists in these field locations?
Todd, do you want to try, or do you want me to go?
Go ahead, Ian.
Well, one thing we were made very aware of by NSF was to make sure that we pulled our weight. And I had heard from a scientist at my university that he would never work with an artist or writer again because of a poor experience that he had had in Antarctica. And so from the outset, I think it was important to us that we tried to become as much a part of a team as we could, even though that's limited. So just, you know, to make an effort. But yeah, we have a completely different audience, I think, than John and his team has. You know, our work ends up in art museums and galleries, and I think we end up talking to different students in high school, middle school, and actually in college as well. And so I think we're just, NSF is really trying to reach a different audience that the science is not necessarily going to get to. And then, I mean, the experience of being with scientists has completely changed my view of the landscape and what I choose to photograph and how I choose to photograph it, because I'm envisioning how the scientists might react to it and where they might draw, where they might annotate. And so there's a lot of change, you know, taking place in my own work. Yeah, and then I think, just to reiterate, yeah, it's the early stages of this particular project, and I think all our perceptions of it will change over the next 3 years. I think it'll be a 3-year project, I think is what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Todd. Do you have anything to add?
Well, the only thing maybe I would add to that is that I think one of the things we're kind of, that the NSF wants is, you know, to share kind of other kind of views of kind of science being done. And I love this photo. I hopefully you can see it if I'm sharing.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, this is John going to work. And, you know, I kind of felt like when we were there with this team, and, you know, for John, this is kind of like, this is just what I do. And to me, this is incredible, you know? And so the stories that just like a single picture like this for me tell, you know, it is really incredible. You know, so this is John, you know, up at 7 in the morning driving to work, you know? So I think there's something kind of fun as well. I think not only is there kind of like this very much an objective from the NSF, but I think there's also a willingness of the NSF to kind of celebrate some of these other things, you know, and kind of indulge just the kind of the beauty of the landscape that is Antarctica. And I think they want us to kind of share these types of moments as much as like just how important this work is.
Thank you. Olivia asks what I view as a follow-up, which is not the differences between how you view things, but are there similarities that you guys have found in your approach to the landscape, your experiences in the field, thereabouts?
Well, I think part of the reason that I collaborate with Todd and then our other collaborator friend, Bruce, is that we have different visions of the land. And I think what is interesting as artists is that the results are so very different. I certainly have been influenced by Todd and Bruce in terms of how I engage with the space. But I think at the same time, we try to be as different as possible, maybe. I don't know. What do you think, Todd?
Yeah, right on. Yeah, it's something John mentioned about light, you know, working with a photographer for such a long time. I really see the world fundamentally different. And I look at light now as an artist. And working with John, you know, I've been doing a lot of kind of writing and reflecting on my time there. His kind of science is helping me kind of think a little bit differently too, as I just kind of walk around and I think about the atmospheric content and like argon for the first time in my life, and how that's something that's all around me that I don't necessarily see, but intellectually I can understand. And so there's something there, you know, I mean, I'm an artist, so I know I'm a little flighty, but moving through a space with a different understanding of what that space is constituted of is really kind of a thrilling thing for me. So
yeah, I'd like to add something there. You know, one thing I think that was very challenging for me at the beginning of this sort of in 2011, working on climate change and starting to photograph glaciers, and I became, I think, frustrated with like, oh, it's another picture of a glacier, and it's another picture of a melting glacier. And at what point, you know, does my knowledge no longer bring anything to that landscape? And so starting to work with scientists that depth of knowledge of what is happening in that space, yeah, it made the landscape so much more for me. And I think in some ways, just the image is very limiting for an audience, because it really, you know, if there's research happening there and there's something interesting scientifically that's happening there, it's important to bring that information and to, you know, that give that depth of, you know, what that image, what's in that image might represent.
I think that's really interesting, Ian. You know, some of the neuroscience research around how people relate to art focuses on our brain's reaction to the fact that people made that art. And, you know, I was drawn to the image of the scientist holding the core because there was a person in it. But, you know, you found a way to have a human imprint even on these landscape pictures without humans in it, because they're handwriting these notes. And there's something about the human touch that I think resonates with me, at least. I think it's interesting.
And as humans, we have now affected every landscape on the planet. So we have imprinted on it.
Absolutely. We have time for just like one or two more questions. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to chime in and echo that from my perspective and share the quick, a quick photo, which is the fact that, you know, in spite of the fact that we have all these beautiful landscapes and desolate places in Antarctica, you know, a lot of it is this, right? It is actually humans in quite close proximity to one another. Here we're getting help on our crosswords by Todd and Ian in the field. You know, I think to me, that's a really interesting juxtaposition, because on the one hand, you're out in this desolate nowhere, and on the other hand, you are crammed together with 8 other people in a very, you know, small space where everything is a shared task. And, you know, you're trying to get these, you know, common goals done. And to me, it was, this season in particular was a very nice mix between the kind of, you know, time to commune with nature and time to, you know, be with other human beings. So that was just my 2 cents.
I know there are more questions here in the chat, and I hope that Ian, John, and Todd, if you want to react to them in the chat, I welcome you to. I just want to finish with the question from Annie about literature or media in which our participants here could independently follow up to learn more about bridging science and art, or other contemporary examples. Are there artists or scientists who are inspirational to you? While you're thinking of that, I want to share one that has been profound for me, which is John Steinbeck wrote a book called Log from the Sea of Cortez, in which he went on a biological expedition into the Gulf of California. And he and his biology ecology friend, Doc Ricketts, wrote a textbook on all the species that they found, but then Steinbeck and Ricketts wrote a narrative of their field experiences. And it's the one book that I've seen that actually captures the ridiculousness of doing field work. And I know there's a question here about equipment and how things work, and Ian wrote about going to the bathroom, and the Steinbeck book, Log from the Sea of Cortez, hits on some of those, like, oh, you're real people out in the landscape doing work and trying to capture what that means. So Ian, John, or Todd, any comments about that?
Well, just the details of you may not pee on the ground in Antarctica. Everything has to be collected and returned to base. So that was challenging when it's you know, -20, -30 outside, and the wind is blowing at 40 knots.
I just wanted to mention really quick, as we're getting up close to 6 o'clock, that I have time after 6 o'clock if anybody wants to talk one-on-one or in small groups about some of these questions that I just can't type quick enough, about working with artists, or you know, working with ice or something as an art medium as well. So I'll do my best to type after I'm done, but I'm also willing to stick around if anybody wants.
Yeah, I'll stick around too. No worries.
And I think you guys have offered to answer email questions as well.
Yeah, I will be out of town the next 3 or 4 days, but next week I'm available.
So any artists that you guys want to mention?
I wrote down some writers that have inspired me a great deal. I generally turn to writing for inspiration, and Gretel Ehrlich is absolutely phenomenal, and she has a book called The Future of Ice, which was very inspirational at the beginning of these projects. I think Rebecca Solnit is someone that everyone should be reading. She writes on contemporary political issues, what's happening day to day, but she also writes a lot about photography and the landscape. One book that I found very inspirational was called The History of Walking. And she also coins the word mansplaining. So very, very influential person for me. I try to read everything she writes.
I'd just add Barry Lopez to that nice list of authors.
All right. Well, we are at 6:01, so I want to give you guys a chance to any parting words from John, Todd, Ian.
I love to collaborate with whoever. If anyone wants to invite me to their field camp and collaborate, you know, if I can figure out how to get there, I'm game.
Yeah, I would just thank everybody for their interest and echo the same thing on the science side of things, that we do science on a number of different projects. And if anybody is interested in working with us on how to more, you know, effectively and broadly communicate these things, I am excited to do it. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll say the same, and sincere thanks for coming out to the workshop. It means a lot to me that you take the time in your day to talk with us a little bit about arts and science. So thank you very much.
Right. And I'm sure all of us want to thank you guys for 2 great days and lots of inspiration. So thank you. I will keep this open for just a minute or two in case there are quick questions, but otherwise I encourage you to follow up by email with Ian, John, Todd, and I will be sending out a follow-up email with some of these resources and question about sharing the work that you guys uploaded.